A nervous young boy steps onto the grand stage of America's Got Talent. His name is Miguel, a Filipino teenager whose small frame and trembling hands hardly matched the size of his dream. The audience expects another ordinary audition, but what they don't know is that this boy has carried the weight of survival, sacrifice, and love in every note he's about to sing. Long before the dazzling stage lights of America's Got Talent, Miguel's stage was nothing more than the cracked sidewalks of Manila. With his battered old guitar slung over his shoulder, he sang beneath flickering street lamps, competing with the honks of jeepneys and the chatter of late-night crowds. He wasn't there to entertain for pleasure, he was there to survive. Miguel's father had passed away when he was only 10, leaving his mother to raise him and his younger sister alone. His mother worked endless hours in a small laundry shop, her hands raw and tired, but even her hardest efforts couldn't keep food consistently on the table. Miguel, still a child himself, decided he had to help. His only gift was his voice, so he poured it into every corner of the city that would listen. Some nights, he came home with only a few coins jingling in his pocket. Other nights, kind strangers slipped bills into his guitar case after being touched by his music. Miguel never asked for much, only enough to buy rice, a little bread, and occasionally, if he was lucky, some fresh fruit for his sister. And yet, no matter how tired he was, he always managed to return home with a smile. He wanted his mother to believe he wasn't burdened, even when his small shoulders carried more weight than any teenager should. Behind that smile, however, was a longing he rarely admitted. He dreamed of standing on a stage where people listened not just out of pity, but out of genuine admiration for his music. He dreamed of a moment where his voice could be more than a means of survival, it could be a beacon of hope. Still, Miguel never chased dreams for himself alone. Every note he sang, every lyric he whispered on those dimly lit nights, was a prayer for his family. A prayer that maybe, just maybe, one day, things would be better. And so, when the opportunity came for him to audition for America's Got Talent, Miguel stepped forward not with the confidence of a star, but with the quiet determination of a boy who had already fought countless silent battles. To the world, he would look like just another hopeful contestant. But behind his timid smile was a story of resilience, sacrifice, and unbreakable love. The theater was vast, far bigger than anything Miguel had ever seen. As he walked toward the center of the America's Got Talent stage, the blinding spotlights made it feel like every eye in the world was fixed on him. For a brief moment, his legs felt heavy, almost unwilling to move. He tightened his grip on the microphone, praying silently that his trembling hands wouldn't betray his nerves. The judges sat before him, their faces expectant yet unreadable. Behind them, thousands filled the seats, murmuring with curiosity. Somewhere beyond the cameras, millions more would eventually watch this moment. To many, it was just another audition. But for Miguel, it was everything. He wasn't here to chase fame or fortune. His dream wasn't to live in mansions or ride in fancy cars. No, his dream was far simpler, yet far greater. He wanted to prove to his mother that her sacrifices had not been in vain. He wanted to give his sister a life where she could go to school without worry, where she didn't have to grow up too fast the way he had. As Miguel stood there, he thought back to his mother's words the night before he left Manila. She had cupped his face in her tired hands and whispered, "Anak, sing not for yourself, but for the people whose hearts need healing. If you do that, you will never fail." Those words echoed now, steadying his nerves. He took a shaky breath, looked out at the vast crowd, and reminded himself why he was really here. This wasn't about proving himself to the world, it was about carrying the love of his family in every note. The audience waited, some skeptical, others leaning forward with curiosity. They saw a skinny teenager with worn shoes, his eyes darting nervously. They couldn't yet know the weight he carried in his young heart. A hush fell across the theater as one of the judges asked, "What's your name?" "Miguel," he answered softly, his accent clear and his voice quivering. The judge smiled warmly. "And what are you here to do tonight?" Miguel swallowed hard, then raised the microphone. With quiet determination, he replied, "I'm here to sing, for my mom, for my sister, and for everyone who believes that even the smallest voices matter." And with that, the music began. The first note slipped from Miguel's lips like a fragile bird breaking free from its cage. It was soft at first, trembling with nervousness, but then it grew, rising with a clarity and power that no one expected from the timid boy who had walked on stage moments earlier. The audience, once whispering and shifting in their seats, froze. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phones lowered. A hush washed over the vast theater, as though every soul had instinctively leaned in closer to catch the purity of his voice. Miguel's tone was raw, unpolished, but breathtakingly real. Every lyric carried a story, nights of hunger, days of sacrifice, and the unbreakable love of a son singing for his family. It wasn't just music. It was truth, wrapped in melody, reaching out and gripping hearts in ways words alone never could. As he sang, Miguel felt his fear dissolve. The lights no longer blinded him, the crowd no longer terrified him. He wasn't just a boy on a stage anymore, he was a messenger, carrying every hardship, every whispered prayer, into the open air. His voice soared higher, fuller, pouring with the weight of someone who had lived 1,000 lifetimes of struggle in his few short years. A tear slipped down the cheek of one of the judges, though Miguel couldn't see it. He kept his eyes closed, letting the music guide him. But in the audience, strangers clutched their chests. Parents thought of their children. Children thought of their parents. Everyone, in some way, found a piece of their own story in Miguel's song. And then came the moment that truly stunned them all. In the middle of his performance, Miguel let out a long, aching note that seemed to hang in the air for eternity. It wasn't perfect, it cracked slightly, betraying the vulnerability of a boy still finding his strength. But that imperfection made it even more powerful. It was real. It was human. By the time he reached the final verse, the theater had been transformed. What began as an ordinary audition had become a collective experience, a reminder of resilience, of sacrifice, and of love. And as Miguel held that last trembling note, the silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was reverence. The song was flowing beautifully when suddenly, Miguel's voice faltered. His throat tightened, his chest heaved, and the note he tried to hold cracked under the weight of nerves. For a heartbeat, the grand stage no longer felt like a dream, it felt like a mountain collapsing beneath him. Miguel's eyes widened. He lowered the microphone slightly, his gaze darting to the floor as if searching for courage he couldn't find. The silence that followed was deafening, and for the first time, fear crept in. What if I fail? What if I let my mother down? The doubts clawed at him, threatening to pull him back into the shadows of obscurity. But then, something remarkable happened. From the back of the theater, a single person began to clap. Another followed. Then another. Within moments, the entire audience was clapping in unison, cheering, whistling, urging him not to give up. The rhythm filled the air like a heartbeat, steady and strong, as if thousands of strangers had suddenly become one family standing behind him. Miguel lifted his head, stunned. The energy of the crowd washed over him like a warm tide. His trembling hands steadied. His lungs filled with renewed breath. He closed his eyes, gripped the microphone tighter, and found his voice again, not just his singing voice, but the voice of his soul. With every beat of the crowd's applause, his notes grew stronger, richer, more powerful. What had begun as a faltering song transformed into a performance unlike anything he had ever given before. He wasn't singing to the audience anymore, he was singing with them, lifted by their compassion, carried by their belief in him. The judges leaned forward, their faces lit with awe as Miguel soared into the final verse. This time, when he reached for the high note, it didn't crack. It rang out pure and radiant, filling every corner of the hall. The boy who moments ago seemed ready to break now stood unshaken, his voice triumphant. And when the last chord echoed into silence, the entire theater erupted. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping and cheering louder than ever, not just for the song, but for the courage of a boy who refused to give up. The theater was still vibrating with applause when one of the judges suddenly rose from their seat. Their eyes were wet with tears, their hands trembling as they reached forward. Then, slam, they hit the golden buzzer. The sound echoed like thunder, and in an instant, golden confetti burst from above, cascading down like a shower of blessings. Miguel froze. His wide eyes shimmered with disbelief as he looked around, his small frame dwarfed by the glittering storm of gold. For a moment, he didn't move. His knees gave way, and he fell to the floor, covering his face as tears spilled freely. The audience roared even louder, chanting his name, clapping until their palms ached. The judges stood, applauding with genuine admiration. Yet Miguel seemed lost in the moment, overcome not by pride, but by something deeper, a sense of gratitude so overwhelming it nearly crushed him. Through his tears, he raised the microphone once more. His voice shook, but his words were clear. This is for my mom and my sister. Everything I do, it's for them. The crowd erupted again, some wiping their own tears. In that moment, it became clear, this was not just a boy winning a talent show. This was a son lifting his family out of years of struggle. This was a brother proving that love can turn the heaviest burdens into songs that inspire the world. One of the judges leaned into the microphone and said, "Miguel, you didn't just move us, you reminded us what music is truly about, heart, courage, and love." Miguel lifted his head, golden confetti sticking to his hair and cheeks. And though he was surrounded by flashing lights and roaring cheers, he wasn't thinking of fame. He was picturing his mother back in Manila, probably crying into her hands as she watched her son's dream come alive. He was imagining his little sister smiling, knowing their lives would never be the same again. As the music swelled and the confetti continued to rain, Miguel whispered to himself, barely audible but full of conviction, "We made it." And in that breathtaking moment, the world understood, sometimes, the smallest voices carry the greatest power.